Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about why President Trump dropped the COVID stimulus negotiations. Jay Waller of the Center for Security Policy joins me to talk about national security, Biden versus Trump, and the latest on hashtag Obamagate, a Clinton dirty trick. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. Headlines were telling people in America that President Trump had walked away from negotiations with the Congress, with the Democrat-run U.S. House and Nancy Pelosi over the next COVID relief package. And I just want to, in the first five today, explain what is true about that and then what is not true. So to start with, President Trump has offered to work with Congress on a clean bill, essentially saying for people eligible for a stimulus check, he's willing to sign a bill that would give a $1,200 stimulus check to everyone eligible. So the real need of people who are struggling because of the unnecessary shutdown due to COVID, but all of the people still struggling, President Trump said, I'm on board, I'll sign that bill, $1,200 stimulus package stimulus check to each person eligible. He's also offered, separate from that, President Trump has said he will also fund and agree to a package, it falls under the PPP language, the Paycheck Protection Program. But basically, he's offered and said he will offer $135 billion, B as in boy, billion, for the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses and an additional $25 billion for the airline payroll support because airlines are struggling about to lay off people. So he's willing to sign on to things that are direct support to people and industries definitely suffering directly due to the shutdowns from COVID. What he's not willing to sign on to was the bill that the House passed. The House under Nancy Pelosi passed a bill, a $2.4 trillion bill, comprehensive. They call it a comprehensive Democrat bailout, a comprehensive package to deal with COVID. I want to just mention some of the things that are in the alleged COVID, comprehensive bill under Nancy Pelosi. Gems like like getting on board with cashless bail, meaning when you're arrested, even sometimes for a violent crime, this leftist effort to reform. I mean, there are some good things going on in criminal justice reform, but this cashless bail idea is basically the idea that claims that because people who commit violent crimes sometimes don't have the money to come up with bail and they can't find a bail bondsman to provide bail for them, they're stuck in jail. So this big trend was cashless bail. Great piece on Congressman Zeldin's website. If you want to go there, is also linked in our website, pointing out all of the harm that's come to innocent citizens in New York because they went with this cashless bail idea. But again, this is one of the pieces Nancy Pelosi and the team, the Democrat team, stuck in their coronavirus bailout bill. Cashless bail. They stuck in a mass prison release program including for violent criminals. So the answer, don't you see, to COVID is to release violent criminals from prison. That very logical connection there. Also, and these are, of course, characterizations. This is not how they word the language, but the gist of what they put in the bill includes nationwide ballot harvesting. We've seen enough chaos in Texas, where I am, other places around the country, ballot harvesting, basically an ongoing attempt by the left to steal this fall election, to engage in vote fraud. And so nationwide ballot harvesting was one of the provisions that Pelosi and her Democrat team put in the supposed coronavirus bailout package. A voter ID ban. Again, the package that everyone's waiting to get help from Washington, and Pelosi and the team passed this $2.4 trillion bill. They actually put in there a ban on voter ID and, of course, stimulus checks to illegal immigrants. What I love about President Trump, because I think what Nancy Pelosi thought and the Democrats thought was they kind of had President Trump, between the proverbial rock and a hard place. He's got to go ahead and fund something stimulus, continue to helping people who are struggling because of the shutdown. So as long as they had him and they knew he had to do that, they would stick in a bunch of Democrat goodies that President Trump, would not dare to, he wouldn't dare to veto the bill. He wouldn't dare not to sign it. They thought they had him. They thought they could force him to sign on to a whole raft of completely irrelevant demands by the left, irrelevant to the whole COVID situation, and they thought they could force him to sign it. But as I say so often on this show, President Trump is unlike any other Republican president we have ever seen in Washington. He actually is a great negotiator. He called their bluff and said no to the whole thing. Not going to give the Democrats all this unwarranted, unjustified, bad policy Democrat ideas simply because they stuck them in to the stimulus bill that the House passed. And to be clear, they passed, Democrat majority in the House passes it. Clearly, the bill is going nowhere in the Senate. The Republican majority isn't going to sign on in the Senate, and clearly President Trump wasn't going to sign it. But the beauty of it was, and actually the bravery of President Trump was, even this close to election, we're now less than 4 weeks away from Election Day, even that close, President Trump said, I'm not signing on to a whole bunch of leftists. People use the expression like, it's a Christmas tree filled with goodies for everybody. Just said, no, we're not doing that. Again, he said in a tweet following the breakdown in communications of negotiations, he would sign on a bill that did give the $1,200 check to individuals who are eligible, a stimulus check because of the challenges with COVID. And he would also offer the $135 billion for the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, and the $25 billion to airlines. So he's willing to give directed aid as needed, not willing to sign on to Nancy Pelosi's effort to push leftist agenda items on the coronavirus stimulus bill. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five. So we have joining us, I mentioned as we started the show, I want to introduce this gentleman. I think we haven't had him on the show before, but he's with Center for Security Policy. His name is J. Michael Waller. He'll be joining us in just a moment. He's a senior analyst for strategy at the Center for Security Policy. And if you listen to my show very often, you know I've had numerous other experts. I have the deepest respect for the Center for Security Policy. Its founder, Frank Gaffney, its current leader, Fred Fleitz, numerous other experts from that organization. This gentleman, why I want him to ask him to come on today, I was grateful he was available, is to talk about something the Center for Security Policy created, and is available online, which is their Center for Security Policy National Security Voter Guide. It runs through serious national security issues and analyzes Vice President Biden and his long track record of being in the Senate and being vice president versus President Trump on these measures, essentially, of how good will you be on national security. The reason I want to talk about this today is because I think that some voters and people who are just too busy to spend a lot of time thinking about politics were kind of driven in their vote, or they may find themselves voting a certain way simply because in the last 30 days, the news cycle has been on one issue, or maybe it's been on COVID or some other issue, and that issue is going to drive their vote. And really, you have many, many issues to be thinking about in choosing the next commander-in-chief. So, J. Michael Waller joining us. He has a PhD in International Security Affairs from the University Professors Program at Boston University. He's a former Walter and Lenore Annenberg Professor of International Communication at the Institute of World Politics. He's also the co-founder of the Blue Team on China in the 1990s. For 13 years, he was a Walter and Leonore Annenberg Professor of International Communications at the Institute of World Politics in Washington. And this is a really cool thing where he designed and taught the world's only graduate program on public diplomacy and political warfare. I could keep reading his resume, but I'd rather start talking to him. So please, we're going to join and welcome to our show, J. Michael Waller. Hi.
Hey, Debbie. Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, sir?
Doing great here in Washington, D.C., to the extent somebody can.
Yeah, yep. It's a wild place to be. Well, I love that the Center for Security Policy, and I say this quite often about Frank Gaffney and currently Fred Fleitz, I love what the center does in terms of when we see issues that challenge America, that are of great concern, instead of just lamenting or hand-wringing, they dive into action and try to think of how do we address this, what could solve this, what experts can address these issues, and they put out information for the public. And so I'm frequently referring people to the center's website. But this thing you guys did, 10 national security issues show stark differences between the candidates. It was a great, great contribution to the political conversation. So, love that. Thank you for doing it.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it was a good job. It was a team effort. We just basically looked at Joe Biden's record and Donald Trump's record and did what they wrote, what they actually did, and not what they say they're going to do.
That's a very important one. I'll tell you, I have some of these marked with my happy little stickies here. I'm going to run through as many as I can. I want to start, though, on the very first one, support and defend the Constitution. And you don't know about my show, but on this show, I'm frequently talking about the Constitution is kind of like the pillars that hold up a bridge, you know, over a bay or something. They hold America in place. If you don't have honoring the Constitution, if you chip away at it, you end up chipping away at the very structure of America. So tell us your thoughts about Joe Biden versus Donald Trump in terms of defending the Constitution.
Well, here's the thing, just as you said, if we don't have a Constitution, we don't have a country. And if we have people constantly reinterpreting our Constitution into something it isn't, we don't have America anymore. So that's the very first national security priority we have. Who wants to keep and preserve our Constitution the way our founders intended for it to be with the Bill of Rights? So Joe Biden, he was on the Senate Judiciary Committee for decades as a senator. He was one of the main people. Remember, he was the one who grilled Clarence Thomas and tried to destroy him as a person when he was being confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court. So Joe Biden has a way of savaging anyone who supports original founders' intent in the Constitution.
I think that issue alone is dispositive about in terms of who defends the Constitution. And it's very interesting because right now, of course, we're going to be in the midst of the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation proceedings in the Senate, and the same theme. It isn't just Joe Biden. It comes from the leftism of today's. I know that you're not partisan, but it comes from the leftist ideology that just says the Constitution kind of gets in the way of the agenda that the left wants, and so people who are going to be strict constitutionalists interfere with the leftist agenda. So I love that point. I love that point, especially about Joe Biden. I'd forgotten he was the one who really, really grilled Clarence Thomas. He was brutal.
Yeah, tried to destroy him. So when you have somebody running for president with a track record like Joe Biden's of ripping up the Constitution and using it as a political weapon to push an agenda rather than to preserve the original intent of the founders of our country, you have someone who cannot uphold his oath to defend the Constitution of the United States.
Absolutely true. Absolutely. And yeah, it's kind of a funny thing. This is getting a little sidetracked, but back to when President Obama was first elected, so it was Obama, Biden, the first term, I recall at that time, there were many Americans who, for the first time, maybe in decades, started to look at and go back to and read again the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, because there was a growing sense, even early on in the first term of their administration, that these people just had a different agenda than perpetuating America as founded on the Constitution. A lot of thought about, are they allowed to do these things? Can they really do that? Don't we have some protections here? Do you recall that at all, that kind of renewed interest in the Constitution?
Yeah, because it was sort of almost universally accepted for a long time that the Constitution's a living document and that it changes when society changes, or say when some foreign country runs a propaganda campaign to change our attitudes, to make us change our Constitution. So if that's the approach that we really took as a people for a very long time, with just a small minority of people saying, no, we have to stick to founding principles, we would have lost our country a long time ago had we maintained that course.
Absolutely. I want to jump to number 3. And again, we're going through your Center for Security Policy National Security Voter Guide. Number 3 has to do with making America safe from bio threats. And this is obviously front and center in the news because of COVID, because of coronavirus, and coming from China. So how did you assess how Vice President Biden versus President Trump score or should be assessed on protecting us from bio threats?
Well, think of this. When Joe Biden was a senator, the very building where he had his committee room, the Hart Senate office building, was subject to an anthrax attack after 9/11. Now, you would think an anthrax attack on your very building in the institutions where you spent decades, you'd think that would be a real impetus to go ahead and say, gee, maybe we should have a national biodefense strategy to protect all of us. He never did anything like that. He was in the perfect place to do that as a senior member of the Judiciary Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee. And then even when he came in as vice president under Obama, Obama did go through some bio-threat strategy that they put together, but it wasn't a strategy. It was just a list of check the boxes type things to make it look like it was a strategy, but there was no way to implement it. There was no way to safeguard the country against it. So here he'd blown his years in the Senate and his 8 years as vice president. Well, remember, Obama picked him because of his national security portfolio. That was Obama's weak point. That's why he picked Joe Biden in the first place.
Right.
So Biden blew his entire career when it concerned him personally and never brought the nation any closer to defending against bio threats. And even worse, he built up the Chinese Communist Party. Look at his Senate record and his vice president record of giving concession after concession after concession, decade after decade to the Chinese Communist Party, regardless of what it did to our country. And of course, who's the entity responsible for this present virus and pandemic? It's the Chinese Communist Party. And Biden won't even lay blame on the Chinese Communist Party for this. Instead, he's blaming Donald Trump. So right there you have it. He has zero. You have to give him a zero on defending the nation against bio threats. Meanwhile, President Trump, even before the pandemic, I think it was 2 years ago, set up a national bio defense strategy. It's right there. I think we posted it on our website in that item number 3 on the voting guide. But you can read the actual strategy. And then he had a whole task force set up to implement us and get us moving toward a bio defense strategy.
I love that, and I love this. Actually, is worth a little more exploring. First of all, that was my very next question was about how, as America realized that the coronavirus we learned early on came from China. Then there is speculation about whether it was negligently released, intentionally released, however it was developed is still open to question. And all this time, as President Trump has been willing to lay blame toward the Chinese Communist Party, you've had the left, especially in the form of Joe Biden, acting as though that is kind of unstatesmanlike or unseemly or unnecessary. And it actually seems like he's kind of signaling, I won't lay blame at the very entity who's responsible. And I think that all by itself is a danger signal about him and national security. You agree?
Oh, sure. Think of what that's telling the Chinese communist leadership.
Yeah.
They can get away with mass murder and making the leadership of our country ill with a virus that escaped from one of their labs. Now, again, if it was deliberate or if it was accidental, it really doesn't matter. Was it first degree murder or was it negligent homicide? It was. You still have responsibility for it. It's just the degree of punishment you should get in return. And Biden never has once laid blame on Xi Jinping. Never has once asked the Chinese Communist Party leadership for an open international investigation into the Chinese Communist Party labs where the virus escaped from. Never once. Instead, the day President Trump protected the country by announcing the travel restrictions from China to prevent the virus from spreading here, that very day, Biden said Trump was a racist and a xenophobe for pursuing this policy, holding China accountable and for blocking traffic into the United States from China. Racist and xenophobic. And Nancy Pelosi said the same thing the same day. And he's kept that theme ever since.
It is truly amazing. It's so great. This is a great conversation because you're jumping right to my next point. But I was going to say that point. Well, it's about leftism. It is like that foreign policy for America is supposed to be turning on the whole question of what's politically correct, what will be acceptable to the world community, we don't want to sound unfriendly to the world. It is to me a childish and it's not protective of America if you can't point the finger of blame at the Chinese Communist Party. And I even noticed the political correctness thing got in there when there was a lot of discussion about, well, you can't really blame China because then maybe people will blame all the Chinese people, or maybe people will blame Americans of Chinese descent. All a politically correct pivot away from the reality that as a leader, you better blame and target the person or entity that's responsible, which was the party, not the poor, innocent Chinese people who also suffered from this virus.
Sure. Sure, and this is the whole point. By targeting the party itself, Donald Trump made a big distinction between the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese people. But Joe Biden couldn't even blame the Chinese Communist Party.
Right, right. I mean, and you know, the whole context of the Chinese Communist Party we've had under President Trump, of course, the willingness is unrelated to national security, but the effort and determination under President Trump to redo our trade deals with China and other countries, to stand strong for America, even when it was challenging what people kind of accepted as, well, this is how China does things. They always steal our secrets. They always steal our copyright. We kind of let things go for decades, and President Trump came along and said, why? Why exactly do we do this? It's fabulous leadership. Okay, another item you have on here. You have a lot. I love this thing. Actually, I encourage our leaders. You should read this document. I printed it off. It's actually great reading. It's not complex. Really great reading. Okay, another one you have is strengthening our national defense. And this is one where I think that during the Obama era, I had national security experts talking about the decisions made about funding for our national defense, funding for our equipment, funding for our troops. There was a sense under 8 years of Obama-Biden that we weakened our national defenses. Let me just start with that. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And in what way? Is it funding, or was it in other ways also?
No, not so much funding, because you can just throw money at something, but it doesn't mean you're improving it or making it better. It's sort of like welfare. So just because you vote for money for defense doesn't mean you're really improving defense. It's really a case of strategy. What are the threats we face as a nation? How do we deal with those threats? Now, if you look at 8 years of Joe Biden as the chief of the Obama national security team, which was why he was chosen as Obama's running mate, did you ever once hear Joe Biden object to Vladimir Putin building a fifth generation of strategic nuclear missiles that are aimed at us?
Not that I recall, yeah.
Did you ever once see Joe Biden say, we need to have a missile defense system to shoot down those missiles if they're aimed at us?
Yeah, and you're much more obviously of an expert than I in national security, but wasn't this all the issue that related to Poland? We had funding there that was allowing us, it was helping them defend against Russian missiles, and Obama
exactly, and helping Poland defend us against Russian missiles, because Poland, unlike Germany and other of our larger NATO allies, Poland said, yeah, we'll put in an American missile defense system on our territory. This will be great. So Poland's showing itself to be a real ally, where we're not just defending Poland. Poland is helping us defend ourselves. Joe Biden opposed that.
He did. It was actually true. That was one thing I kind of thought that the Obama-Biden team would back off from, because there was so much criticism, and also because there was no justification that I understood well that for their decisions, for their actions. It was just kind of we don't want to seem unfriendly to Russia, so we're going to back away from defending the world against their aggression.
Right, right.
Truly amazing. Okay, let's talk about.
And also because Poland wanted to defend itself against invasion by illegal immigration from all of these refugees coming in, and Poland said, we're going to save our country. We're not going to ruin it. And of course, now Poland became racist all of a sudden, and that had to be opposed also. So yeah, Biden just dumped our strong NATO allies in favor of the socialist status quo.
Absolutely true. It's just amazing. You know, yeah, it's just amazing. Okay, I want to talk about two more things. North Korea. I think that, you know, and I was thinking about, as these candidates position themselves, and we have all this national conversation about the presidential race, it seems like every election cycle I can recall, on the Democrat side, if they're running against an incumbent Republican, the argument always is, look what whoever it is has done. You know, they have ruined our relations with our allies. Our allies hate us. Our enemies are emboldened. This is the argument every election cycle. And this is the argument, again, the noise out of the left. So has President Trump made things worse with North Korea?
No, he's made things better. I mean, just think, we've been in a technical state of war with North Korea since the 1950s, because the Korean War never officially ended. And rather than just doing the same old worthless, fruitless policies of sanctioning North Korea, which does have some effect, but it doesn't make things better, Trump decided to engage, and he relied on psychological profiles of Kim Jong-un, the the grandson of the communist founder of North Korea, and said, let's see if we can make some headway with this guy. He gave it a try. It hasn't worked so far, but there haven't been those missile tests as North Korea had been doing before under the Obama-Biden regime. So you've got no, they're not Iranian missile tests in North Korea, because we saw from the telemetry of some of the North Korean missile tests that these were Iranian computer code coming from in Farsi coming out of these things. So Biden made that worse too on the Iran side. Maybe we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But the point is, Trump has tried to do something, and he's put the squeeze on China, because North Korea doesn't do anything unless the Chinese regime approves of it. And so Trump has really changed the whole dynamic with North Korea, and given us an opportunity to finally end this conflict, and maybe even help North Korea change its own system.
Well, it's a tough thing with North Korea, because I think that people who want to be critical of President Trump say, well, Kim Jong-un is still the dictator, and life is still horrible in North Korea, and they are still unreliable, and they are alarming to all of the region around them. North Korea is alarming. But even as you're saying, even to have put pressure on China that kind of controls what controls what North Korea is willing to do, President Trump has to a degree diffused the threat of North Korea. Is that accurate?
Right, and that's the whole idea, is to remove that threat from the region. I mean, you're going to have a terrible regime for a long time, because there are no North Koreans who know how to, what good governance is, or what the role of citizen to government is, or anything like that. So it'll take generations, even under the best circumstances, to help North Korea become a real civilized country. But it can take a much shorter time to prevent North Korea from being a military threat to ourselves and to our neighbors and allies.
Yeah. Okay, another item you have, and again, we're doing the Center for Security Policy National Security Voter Guide. And by the way, for our listeners, if you go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, under shows, drop down list of links. I have links to all the articles we'll be talking about today, including this particular piece. It's very good in helping people think for themselves what are the national security threats we face, and how do Biden and Trump measure up. So next one I want to talk about is the Middle East. And I have been all over. Yesterday I did a little, or a couple days ago, a little piece just about the great consequence of the deal that President Trump worked through with Israel and the UAE. And I actually went at from the perspective of, because they got that deal going, there is a fund in Israel that my husband happened to be very involved with in Israel, that is a venture capital fund that's now making deals with people in Bahrain. It's like lifting everybody's potential and opportunity and life. I mean, it's a real life consequence of that deal. But I love to have you really talk about the difference between the perception of what Biden would do with the Middle East situation and President Trump.
It's night and day. You remember when Biden was vice president, the national security team had a presidential study directive that justified the U.S. building an alliance with the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, this is an Islamist organization that has the same strategic end goals as Al-Qaeda or ISIS. They just have a different way of going about it, and that's through infiltrating political and cultural systems around the world, even in our own country, and especially in Texas. So it's a Biden policy to support that subversive jihadist organization in the name of fighting terror.
That is actually true. You go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Stop me when. No. So secondly, let's look at the Iran deal. Now, there can never be any hope of any kind of peace or security in the Middle East if the United States government is going to be bailing out the mullahs in Iran. They were the ones supporting so much of the terrorism in the region. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard was the one that was planting those IEDs in Iraq and Afghanistan to maim and kill our own people. Killed hundreds of our own military personnel directly. Did you ever once hear Joe Biden denounce the Iranian regime for that? Never. So he was behind this whole Iran deal to funnel American cash into the Iranian regime in the hopes that the Iranian regime might behave.
Yeah, that whole concept of, we talk about this a lot on my show, because I'm very focused on protecting Israel, and also on recognizing who the threats are to Israel, and obviously Iran being one of the major ones. And during the time that the Obama Biden team were negotiating the Iranian deal. In fact, I had experts on from the Center for Security Policy, I can't remember which people, but talking about, as the negotiation was occurring, how frightening this seemed, that we were making a deal through President Obama's negotiations, making a deal with the mullahs that essentially enabled them to maintain their development of nuclear weapons because you couldn't inspect the areas where they were most likely to be developed, sending money over there, and all of that. It's either incumbent on presidential candidate Biden to say, that was a terrible thing, we shouldn't have done that, that was terrible to enable the mullahs that way, or, I agree and explain himself, but he was part of that team, part of that presidential Obama administration, and he either ought to denounce it or hanging around his neck, he's responsible for it. But Iran being the #1 terror exporting country in the world, and we're sending them pallets of cash, that I hope is something probably no reporter will ever ask him. I'd love to hear Biden explain where he stands on that. Was he okay with that or not okay with that? Your thoughts?
Yeah, and one, you have to assume that he's okay with it because he never once criticized it. He never said, well, everything Obama did, just because he did it doesn't mean I support it. Think of back when George Bush was Ronald Reagan's vice president. He was undermining Reagan, and his whole team was undermining Reagan the whole time. Ultimately, they took over much of the Reagan administration at the end, and they did something very different and very mainstream and swampy at the end of it. And then he had his one term to succeed Reagan. So George Bush, the elder, made little attempt to say that he was the same thing as Ronald Reagan. To the contrary, Joe Biden could do something like that, and he could have done something like that with Obama, but he instead became a yes man for everything Obama did. So, and his people did too. His present national security team did that under Obama. So all we have to judge is what he actually did in the past, and what he did in the past is very dangerous to us. More stuff on the Middle East, though, Debbie. You have the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which everyone would say, well, it will destroy the Middle East, it will cause a war, it will do all this. What's it done? It's like the rest of the Middle Eastern countries, the Arab countries, the Muslim world has at least been silent about it. They haven't accepted it, but they've just gone along with it and said, okay, well, we just have to deal. And so they have to deal. What comes out of that? United Arab Emirates, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, right across the water from Iran, bordering Saudi Arabia. What do? They take the lead with their neighbor, Bahrain, and then with quiet support from Egypt and elsewhere to make peace with Israel and to open diplomatic relations after the U.S. recognizes Jerusalem as the capital. And what's going to happen next? There's talk now that Saudi Arabia will have a similar recognition of Israel. And once you have Saudi Arabia and these wealthy petro countries, and then the world's largest Arab country, Egypt, making their own separate arrangements and peace with Israel. And in fact, I've spent a lot of time with the Egyptians, and they view Israel as a military ally. Egyptian security depends on a strong Israel. This happened under Donald Trump. This didn't happen under Obama and Biden.
8 years of them, yeah. On a related point, and I've made this point in the show before, but I think it's illustrative of thinking outside the box, is that previously American presidents thought the only way you can help Israel negotiate deals with surrounding Arab majority countries, Muslim majority countries, is you first have to solve the conflict with the Palestinians. And you have to get that right before you can do anything else. And President Trump did try, and they came up with a deal, and it didn't fall into place the way it was proposed. But the Trump administration said, you know what, this may not ever get solved, but we're going to move forward with Israel, Bahrain, Israel, others, working with them. And actually, because these agreements are either in place or being discussed, I think it's weakened the bargaining power of the Palestinian Authority, because Israel's got, this is amateur hour here. I'm a lawyer by background, not a national security expert, but I read a lot. But I want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, this completely undermined the Palestinian Authority, because before it was the wealthy Arab countries saying, oh, look at the poor Palestinians, we have to help them out, and Israel is oppressing them. You don't hear them saying that anymore, except for Qatar, which is this one jihadist regime right near UAE, right next to Saudi Arabia also. And they're supporting these jihadi terrorist movements around the world. They're not happy with it. But the rest of the Arabs really don't care much about the Palestinians anymore, because the Palestinians won't get their act together. They're constantly fighting among themselves, and the leadership is always stealing the international aid that's being given to help their own people. So finally, the other Arab countries have shown they're completely fed up with this.
I'm loving it. Okay. Michael Waller, I love talking with you about, again, for our listeners, it's the Center for Security Policy National Security Voter Guide. Ran through 10 very big time issues in the arena of national security, actually analyzing the conduct of Vice President Biden in his term as many years in the Senate and then as Vice President versus positions taken and actions taken by President Trump in the 3 years since or 3+ years he's been president. So I want to give you a chance to wrap up any kind of conclusions or other observations you want to add to our conversation about your piece from the Center for Security Policy.
Well, yeah, if you want appeasement to Putin, vote for Joe Biden. If you want to have no southern border, vote for Joe Biden. If you want to let Iran run the Middle East and destroy Israel and just destroy the entire region and get ourselves into another war, vote for Joe Biden. If you want to support the Chinese Communist Party, vote for Joe Biden, because a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Communist China.
Wow. On that note, that's a great conclusion. Thank you so much for taking time. This was a great conversation. Thank you very much for taking time to join me today. It was fun. Thank you so much.
See you, Debbie. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, folks, you got to read that document. You'll love it. Honest to goodness, easy to follow, and very easy when you learn those points to tell your friends. One last story today I want to hit, and this is going to develop, I'm sure, more and more. In fact, tomorrow we have Congressman Louis Gohmert coming on with us to talk about these issues. But Washington is all abuzz about the news that more and more information is coming out, making very, very clear that during the time all of us thought that there was just a presidential campaign going on between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, you had the Hillary Clinton team, and apparently Hillary Clinton herself, being part of the effort to cook up this plan to, as a campaign tactic, as a campaign attack job, a Clinton dirty trick against her opponent, President Trump. You had Hillary Clinton cooking up the plan to claim there was collusion between the Russian people, or between Putin and the Russian leadership and the Trump team. And so this, we talked about this last week, I think it was, that this was a huge bombshell that came out. So much, in fact, what came out were notes handwritten by then CIA Director John Brennan under Obama saying, yeah, you know, we got intel from Russia. And this is Russian intel telling them, hey, you know what? We've picked up, because obviously Russians are spying on the Clinton campaign. We've picked up, the Russians say, that Hillary's cooked up this plan to get, essentially, to start the whole campaign tactic of claiming that Trump, the Trump team, is colluding with the Russians somehow. So this is a kind of an amazing it's a spectacle to behold, really, from our end of things, because for the longest time, America, we had listened to 3+ years of the Mueller investigation, millions of dollars, lives ruined, fortunes ruined. We had the Trump presidency for the first 3 years, just seemingly overwhelmed with accusations, headlines every day at all the Democrat media mob sources, headlines every day talking about how, you know, latest little clue, maybe this is proof. And I mean, just the entire Trump presidency, the attempt of the left to overwhelm the Trump presidency and everything he wanted to do with allegations that all turned out to be a big fat lie. There was, as we finally learned after the Mueller investigation concluded, zero, zip, nada evidence of any kind of collusion between Trump and the Russians. And now we're on to the point of recognizing that we have, in fact, Hillary cooked up this idea herself. Well, the two things that are happening right now, we will be talking about more tomorrow with Congressman Louis Gohmert. One was, there was a tweet by President Trump. He's taking action again. And I want to ask Matt DeWonderful, this is the Trump tweet. Okay, here we have. I have fully authorized the total declassification of any and all documents pertaining to the single greatest political crime in American history, the Russia hoax. Likewise, the Hillary Clinton email scandal. No redactions. And what's so great about this is not actually a first-time thing. President Trump previously had said he had authorized, this is a reauthorization by President Trump of the declassifying of documents to get them out there for the American people to see. So now here we are. We're less than 4 weeks from the election, and President Trump is saying, hey, you know what already? Let's get them out there. So you have Attorney General Barr allegedly looking into, with Durham working underneath him, looking into what went on and who cooked all this up. This news now out, Trump is saying, and the news actually came out in part because the Director of National Intelligence, DNI, John Ratcliffe, released this to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and they in turn had this. So information is out there. Trump is saying, put it all out there. Put it all out there. Everything you have, put it out there. No redactions, declassify, get it out there. And I ask you, my friends, is that the action? Are those the words? Is that the choice of a man who feels guilty or has any fear about whatever happened about Trump-Russia collusion? Is that something you would do if you're Trump and you're thinking, oh, I got away with it, no one found out? These are the actions, these are the words, this is the mission of a president who knows there was nothing to it. He's demanding that this be put out for the American public to see, so you, the average American voter, can see what really happened, and you can see how the entire thing was cooked up by the American left. Next thing, that was Trump's tweet. So Sidney Powell, the attorney, the fabulous attorney for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who's still in her own battles defending him, she's now actually filed a motion for saying that the judge over the case, Emmett Sullivan, needs to recuse himself, just must be removed from the case because he's obviously acting. I think her most recent brief compared the words of Judge Emmett Sullivan in the hearing to Rachel Maddow. That is what it says, pretty funny. But anyway, back to her. She's weighing in on this too. So here's a Sidney Powell tweet in response to what President Trump said. Sidney Powell's tweet says, Dear Mr. President, I've mapped the wonderful, and if you have that one, guess not. Okay, there it is. Okay. Dear Mr. President, you must order the immediate declassification and fire those stalling tomorrow. And her point is, authorizing isn't strong enough. They can all still stall. And there's just fabulous point she's making. It's one thing for the president to say, okay, you have permission. I am telling you can if you want to. And she's saying, no, order it. Don't authorize, order it. Make these people release what they know. Make them release all these documents. And again, this would only be what Trump is doing because he knows he's innocent. He knows he was a victim of a fraud cooked up by the left. He knows it, and they know it. And so then you get to the question, okay, well, what is it that, would prevent at this point? Why doesn't Barr or Durham, why don't they release it all? They've gotten authorization from the president, and you get kind of worried. You get kind of worried. What is holding them up? One speculation floating around Washington is that some of the people whose bad actions, whose illegal actions might be exposed if this is all released, some of these people are in a position to hold other people under threat. I mean, if you're part of this whole effort and you realize if everything is released, unredacted, everyone sees everything, you realize, wow, I may be actually in trouble. I may get prosecuted. But these people who are under potential threat of prosecution also themselves are aware of many other national secrets, many other things that people don't know about. And so they are in a position to be threatening. And I don't know that this has happened, but there is definitely talk about this idea that they can't just release all of this without redactions because there are some threats coming from the people who might get prosecuted saying, you're going to put my name out there, I'm going to put X, Y, and Z out there. You're going to be hearing a lot of things the American public doesn't know. So maybe all that is weighed in the mix. But there was actually, in addition to that last tweet from Sidney Powell, something President Trump tweeted. He actually retweeted a cartoon someone had done. And this, Matt the Wonderful, there it is. This is Attorney General Barr on the right. And I guess I think it's some comedian. I don't know who it is. Anyway, but the cartoon is obviously saying, for the love of God, arrest somebody. And I'm telling you, people, this is a sign. The president, well, may like or not like his tweets, think he tweets too much, whatever you think about that. This is the president saying, you know, Attorney General Barr, I've had about enough. I've had about enough. The American people, anyone paying attention, to be clear, if you listen to my show very often or other serious conservative thinkers, everyone paying attention understands what happened. There's no mystery about it. There may be some outlying people you didn't realize were involved. Everyone understands what happened. They understand all of the players. They understand the lies, the crimes, the felonies. They understand. So then you really have to get at the question, what is the reason not to release it now? Obviously, President Trump is pushing to have it out now. Obviously, the left is arguing that if Attorney General Barr or Durham were to release things now, it may be viewed as interfering with the fall election, that somehow it's weighing in unfair to, to the Democrats to put all this out last minute. Folks, it's unfair to the American people not to put it out. It's unfair. The American people have been waiting long enough and paid enough tax dollars to all of these people in Washington perpetrating this hoax, perpetuating the hoax, perpetuating the cover-up, making false allegations against innocent Americans. The American people have seen it, they have funded it, and they are tired of it. They're sick of it. They are entitled to the truth now, not after the election. They're entitled to understand all the players involved. And yes, I know the emails I will get from some of you later. Yes, I understand. That means some Republicans. It does. There are likely Republicans, especially on the Senate side, who may have been aware of these things, complicit in some way. Who knows? Whoever it is, it's the only way to drain the swamp. You drain the whole swamp. Even the swamp dwellers you thought you liked. You have to get, if you want to get the American justice system back, if you want to have faith restored in the national law enforcement agencies, the FBI, the DOJ, the entire DOJ, the NSA, CIA, all these people, you have to completely expose what happened, drain the swamp, indict these people, and send them off on their way to a fair trial with a jury. That is what you have to do. You can't let this stay under the rug. And there's a lot of talk about some of the players in Washington, not just Barr and Durham, but other people that have the CIA right now thinking that they can stall the orders to release things or stall releasing things that they don't really have a reason not to release until after the election, hoping that if Biden wins, all of this entire scandal, worst scandal ever in American political history ever, that the whole scandal can be swept under the rug. This is the goal of the Democrats, to hide the truth from the American people. The goal of President Trump, the actions of an innocent man are saying, I want it all out there, and I want it all out there now. I will take the consequences. I want it out there now. So that's brewing in Washington. We'll hear from Congressman Gomer tomorrow, what he might not know and think about all this stuff. But there are a lot of people, talking about the idea that this is now regularly referred to as Obamagate, that, the conduct of Obama, clearly from Brennan's notes, being aware that Hillary tried to cook up this scheme, aware that Hillary had this idea she could somehow convince the American public during the campaign and afterward that Trump colluded with the Russians. Obama very much aware of that, how much he was actually controlling and directing it. Many people speculate he had to be ultimately the head of it all. It probably had to be Obama. But the idea of the left-wing darling President Obama actually facing responsibility for the actions he took, it's a monumentally consequential time in American history. We do not lightly investigate past presidents and certainly not for relatively minor things. But this scandal, this abuse of power of the Department of Justice and the FBI and the CIA and the NSA, this abuse of power, the abuse of the FISA court system, the abuse of getting search warrants for innocent people based on lies, if you don't hold people accountable who cooked that up, who participated in it, who covered it up, you're really surrendering the integrity of the justice system in America. It is that serious. It is that simple. It is that absolute. There must be accountability. And so I still do hold out hope that we're going to get absolutely all the way to the bottom of everything that happened. I think that is what President Trump is pushing for. I think if he takes the advice of Sidney Powell, and she's saying you can't just authorize release, you have to order the release. He just may do that. And then we'll all find out, what Obama knew when he knew it, and what all the other players involved knew, and what they did. And even if you end up having people, you have threats from people who are going to be indicted saying, well, if you expose me, I'm going to expose this, I'm going to tell this. Let the chips fall where they may. You can't let a scandal of this magnitude go unchecked, go unrebuked, because otherwise you surrender the entire rule of law in America. As I do at the close of every show, I like to tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we started out today talking, our very first story today was about why Trump dropped the COVID stimulus negotiations. Seems so long ago since we talked about that, doesn't it? Anyway, why it matters to you. The need among many COVID unemployed Americans is serious and continuing. Pelosi and the left loaded the relief bill with leftist wish list items having nothing to do with the real needs of the COVID unemployed. Pelosi believed Trump would have to cave for fear of being labeled insensitive. And they are, by the way. The left is already attacking him for not just signing off on this bloated bill the Democrats came up with. Trump called Pelosi's bluff, said he would sign a bill calling for direct $1,200 payments to individuals and bolstered PPP, but otherwise called off negotiations until after the election, when he has promised more robust relief. Trump understands negotiations. He is never afraid to walk away, and he does not fear the spin from the discredited mainstream media. Republican leaders need to learn from Trump. And the latest on Obamagate and Clinton dirty trick. The open secret known by engaged Americans for 4+ years, the Russia collusion story was always a hoax, a political dirty trick hit job almost surely orchestrated by Hillary Clinton and coordinated with the Obama-Biden CIA, DOJ, and FBI. It is the most outrageous political scandal in the history of the United States of America. An actual conspiracy seemingly among the highest-ranking officials in the federal government to rig an election, and when that didn't work, to overthrow the duly elected President of the United States, and to violate laws and defraud courts with impunity in order to do so. The only things more outrageous than the scandal itself are, 1, the mainstream media's complicity in it to this day. There's almost no mainstream media coverage. And number 2, the inability or unwillingness of Barr Durham to impose accountability on the lead perpetrators. Trump will make sure millions of Americans know this before November 3rd. And that, my very fine friends, is America Can We Talk for today. If you want to email me about anything related to the show, you can do that. You can email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com. Whatever social media you're using, listening to this, please do all the social media things that help this show so much. Please like, please share, please subscribe on YouTube, follow me on Twitter. Please do those kind of things to help this show. This show is being very much repressed by the social media giants who do not like the conservative message getting out to the American people. So I ask for your support and the actions you can do like that. Like, share, subscribe. Share the show with your friends. You can also subscribe to my weekly email. You can go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, and on the home page, hit the subscribe button, and you'll get a once weekly email from me with has links to all the past shows, all the interview of the previous week, the topics, the interviews, anything from the past show, a week show is all in there. It's a great way to catch up on the weekend, and it's a great way to share the show with your friends. You can just forward the email I send to you to other friends you want to share the show with. If you like to support this show, I cannot tell you how much I could use that and appreciate it. You can support this show again at our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, there's a donate button. You make a one-time or recurring donation. This show is entirely listener supported. I need your help, and I would appreciate it very much. I will never stop speaking up for the great, extraordinary experiment in human liberty that is America. It's the entire purpose for doing my show, to speak up for the extraordinary greatness of America to encourage more and more people to recognize the unique blessing America is to ourselves, to us, and to the world. It's our job, it's our generation's turn to defend this extraordinary idea that is America, and it is very much under siege in this election cycle from the anti-American left. It's up to American patriots to defend this country in every way they know how, and that's what I try to do every day in the show. So, thank you for listening to America Can We Talk every Monday through Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Time, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I will talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.